So one of the worst people on planet Earth, and I don't think that's an exaggeration, is going to run against Trump in the Republican primary. Or, it certainly indicates that. So, granted, this source is sketchy, but, apparently Bolton was playing footsie with this idea on a British TV show. So John Bolton announces he will run for the White House in 2024 against former boss Donald Trump as he blasts the ex-president's, quote, terminal decline. To be fair, he is correct about the terminal decline thing. Trump's approval rating is 30%. He's never been less relevant than he is at this moment, even though you still have the likes of Kevin McCarthy and others genuflecting at his altar. So here's what they say. Ex-National Security Advisor John Bolton has revealed he will stand against his former boss in the 2024 election. The veteran foreign policy hawk, who was branded Mr. Tough Guy by Trump, said his White House campaign will focus on being tougher on China and Russia. Yes, because if there's anything that the American people are yearning for, it's a more hawkish, bellicose, standoffish policy towards Russia and China. I don't know if this guy is such an idiot that he doesn't understand that a war with China and or Russia is literally not the same as the Iraq War or any of the coups he did in Latin America. Like, this is, okay, you're really talking about putting the future of civilization in jeopardy. If you want to, actually fight Russia, actually fight China. This is this is psychopathic, is what this is. These are, powerful nation states. In the case of Russia, they actually have more nuclear weapons than we do. And he makes it seem like, Betsy and John, who wake up and go to their 9 to 5 and take care of their kids and barely, being able to pay the bills, they're sitting there I think we really should do more sanctions and crack down harder and potentially gear up for war with China or Russia. Total psycho shit. Total. Imagine, and he makes it seem like that would be the centerpiece of his campaign. War with China? War with Russia? Who's on board? Yay! I would love to see a poll on what percentage of Americans, to ask the question, should we go to war with China or Russia? What number would come back there? 4%? 8%? Maybe? The 74-year-old already has his Republican ticket rival in his sights, saying support for his MAGA policies is in terminal decline. Speaking to Good Morning Britain today, Bolton said, I would get in to win the nomination, and I would do it primarily on the basis that we need a much stronger foreign policy. So this guy looks at 900 military bases around the world, looks at the fact that we spend more on our military than the 10 next biggest countries combined, and he goes, Jesus, that's not enough, man. We need 1,700 military bases. We need to spend more than the next 30 countries combined. What? Okay, there was just a story that came out in the Responsible Statecraft outlet, which found that the Pentagon failed 5 audits in a row, and they can't account for 59% of their money. We're talking about literally trillions of dollars missing. Trillions of dollars. And John Bolton looks at that and goes, I want to give trillions more to them. I don't want any accountability. I want to let Raytheon and Boeing and all these defense contractors loot the treasury, and I want to build our military even bigger. This guy is genetically imperialist. It is in his DNA. It is running through his blood. I think it's important. It's important that it's understood, not just in Moscow, but it's understood in places like Beijing, that unprovoked aggression against your neighbors is not something the United States and its allies will tolerate. Oh my God, the irony is so deep. Unprovoked aggression is this guy's brand. It's what he lives for. Unprovoked aggression. This guy was, one of the leading thinkers, and using the word thinker is a stretch, but he set up the ideological framework for invading Iraq. He was at the Project for a New American Century, a right-wing think tank, neocon think tank, which made the argument we need to go into Iraq. And, for those of you who don't remember, Saddam Hussein did not do 9/11, didn't work with Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And it was an attack against a country that didn't attack us. So unprovoked aggression. That is the definition of unprovoked aggression. He didn't even have the weapons of mass destruction. They lied about that too. When they moved the goalposts, they were actually, he's got weapons of mass destruction. That wasn't true. And then they just move the goalpost to, well, he's just, like a bad dictator, and that's why we're going to take him down. There's so many bad dictators that we support. So clearly that wasn't the reason. This guy led the charge on that. Bolton has been a fixture of Republican administrations for decades, serving as Ronald Reagan's Assistant Attorney General, Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs under George H.W. Bush, and multiple roles under George W. Bush. He served as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Affairs from 2001 to 2005. Then he was appointed U.S. Ambassador to the UN, while also campaigning for the Iraq War as Director of the Project for a New American Century. Under Trump, he served from April 2018 to September 2019 as National Security Advisor, 2 years after he was overlooked as a potential Secretary of State because the GOP president didn't like his mustache inside his... Classic Trump. Yeah, this guy, he's okay, but his mustache, I don't know about that. It makes him look very weird, very strange. 80s porn star vibes. We don't like that. Come on, man. By the way, the reason why him and Trump would butt heads is because every now and then Trump would do something half decent on foreign policy. Like, for example, he wanted to meet with North Korea. He wanted to get some sort of an agreement with North Korea where they wouldn't be able to develop nukes. And John Bolton was against him every step of the way. When Trump was talking about we need to get out of Syria, John Bolton was like, no, never. I will stand up to you, man. I will stand up to this rogue leader. So every time Trump tried something half decent, John Bolton was there to tell him that's a terrible idea. When Trump repeatedly would say, I want to get out of Afghanistan. Now, by the way, he didn't, right? So don't give him credit. But he would say, I want to get out, and Bolton would be like, no, we can't do that. We have more war and new wars. We don't get out. That's crazy. So remember, in the middle of the North Korea negotiations, John Bolton said to the media, we're looking at doing the Libya model with North Korea. The Libya model is you give up your weapons and then we invade you and topple you anyway. So why would North Korea ever make a deal? You're telling them we're going to topple you no matter what. You're telling them you can't trust us. But that's what he wanted to broadcast because, again, he wants war. That's all he cares about. The pair later clashed over foreign policy views on Iran and Afghanistan, and Trump tweeted on September 9th that his services are no longer needed due to their many disagreements. So on Iran, they actually didn't have that much difference. I mean, maybe Bolton wanted a literal ground invasion and Trump didn't want to do that, but Trump ripped up the Iran agreement, which was honestly one of his worst decisions among a million terrible decisions. Trump ripped that up, and he also assassinated General Soleimani on the ground at a time when General Soleimani was fighting ISIS. So he de facto served as the Air Force for ISIS. Good job. So they weren't that different on Iran. In theory, they were a little different on Afghanistan, but fundamentally, Trump went with Bolton. He ended up doing Bolton's policy. He stayed in there the entire time. Bolton refuted this version of events, saying he offered to resign. So far, Trump is the only Republican to announce their candidacy for the 2024 election, while the favored Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is widely expected to run. Speaking to Good Morning Britain today, Bolton said, I think Trump's support within the party itself is in terminal decline. I wouldn't run as a vanity candidate. If I don't think I could run seriously, then I wouldn't get in the race. He was then asked about the UK's political turmoil of 2022, a year which saw 3 prime ministers after Liz Truss's famous blah, 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 blah. Really don't care what he thinks about the UK. Honestly, really don't care what he thinks about anything, but this is kind of funny nonetheless. So here we have Meet the Press. Breaking. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton is considering a 2024 presidential run if it would prevent former President Trump from taking office. So anyway, is there anything else here that's important enough to share? So yeah, I don't know. Based on this article, it looks to me like it's actually not a guarantee that he's running yet. It looks like a very clickbaity headline, but the things he said were not definitive. And that would make sense because I haven't seen any other outlets report on this. So he's heavily considering it. He's flirting with it. He's teasing it, but I wouldn't pound the gavel yet. Let's see what it says here. I think the voters, the Republican voters, people who choose the Republican nominee, nearly 95% disagree that Trump is more important than the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. That stuff is true. It's always funny because Bolton liked to posture and say, bro, this guy's crazy because he tried to coup our own government. That's insane. What we do is coup other governments. I think he actually made the argument, look, I know how coups work because I've done a bunch of them. And so that was an attempted coup, but it was a bad attempt. When you brag about committing war crimes, and that's what this guy does. So I tweeted about Bolton recently on December 5th. Neocon John Bolton pushed regime change in Iran, Syria, Libya, Venezuela, Cuba, Yemen, and North Korea. He was one of the Iraq War architects. He orchestrated the Iran deal pullout, and he removed the U.S. from the International Criminal Court. He says he may run for POTUS. He should be in jail. So that's the other thing. there was a time when we were, on the brink of getting into the International Criminal Court, and John Bolton was the one who made sure we did not subject ourselves to international law, that we would be above the law. So this guy, it's hilarious because the right likes to pretend we're in favor of law and order, bro. And that is the exact opposite of law and order. That is, we are above the law in every way, shape, and form. This guy is a war criminal, a warmonger, an imperialist, and he doesn't even try to hide it. So, Syria, he wanted to topple Bashar Assad at the exact same time that you had jihadists like Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra Front running rampant in Syria. Gee, I wonder what would have happened in that situation. He was, intimately involved in Libya, toppling Libya with Gaddafi. Now, nobody's a fan of Gaddafi. The guy was a psychopath, but at the same time, after you got rid of him, now what do you have? A failed state in Libya with literal slave markets. Venezuela, he's they were trying a coup attempt under the Trump administration. This is something that Bolton was basically in charge of. And he's one of the reasons that people pretended like Juan Guaido was the president of Venezuela when this guy was never elected as the president of Venezuela. It was like the most cockamamie coup attempt I've ever seen in my life. I mean, of course, they do the sanctions and the embargo and they crack down as hard as they can, but they were just pretending like this guy's president. He wasn't president. He wasn't president at all. It was Maduro who was president. They just denied reality. Cuba, a lot of people don't know this. During the Bush administration, John Bolton led the charge to argue that Cuba has bioweapons and they're a threat to the United States. So we need to topple them. So he did the whole, Iraq thing with Cuba. They tried to build an argument for Cuba that we need to invade and topple that government. I mean, this is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, bro. This is crazy. Acting like, a decrepit, aging, hunched over Fidel Castro was some sort of existential threat to Cleveland. Like, what are we talking about here? And then, of course, he supports the Saudi genocide in Yemen, and he wants to go to war with North Korea. So, I mean, there's never been a worse person. He should be in prison. No exaggeration. If the Nuremberg laws were upheld, he would be hanged. I think that's undeniable. So, on a serious note here at the end, if he runs, which again, I wouldn't say it's certain, but he's really close to jumping in and declaring it. But if he were to run, it's not a good sign because then you have him, you have Pompeo, you have Tim Scott, you have a bunch of these people who are going to run, and that splits the anti-Trump vote among like 5 or more people, and then Trump has his votes consolidated where he's going to get minimum like 25%, 30%. And Trump could win with just that plurality. So really, they all need to fucking clear the field for Ron DeSantis because he's the only one at this moment that really can take him down. But if you have all these idiots running, it ain't going to work. John Bolton couldn't get elected dog catcher. He has one of the worst personalities I've ever seen in my life. He clearly hasn't had an erection since 1983. And he's only able to get an erection if he sees the blood of dead children. So, hilarious that he's running. It would be funny to watch, but also, he really, really shouldn't run. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.